Germany, March 10, 1918. The First World. War was still raging when Günther Rall was born in the small Bavarian town of Gaggenau. The sound of distant artillery did not reach his cradle, but the consequences of war would shape every part of his childhood. By the time Rall could walk, Germany had already lost. The once proud empire had collapsed. The Kaiser was gone. The nation was humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, crushed under economic penalties, and torn apart by political chaos. Soldiers returned home not as heroes, but as broken men, some missing limbs, others missing hope. Günther grew up watching these men. They were everywhere, sitting silently in beer halls, standing in bread lines, staring at nothing, haunted by memories no one wanted to hear. For a young boy, war was not glory. It was loss. A childhood of instability. Rall's family was middle class, disciplined, and deeply affected by Germany's collapse. His father, like many men of that generation, struggled to adapt to civilian life in a country that felt defeated and directionless. The 1920s brought no peace. Germany was shaken by hyperinflation, political assassinations, street battles between extremists, hunger, and unemployment. As a child, Günther saw money become worthless overnight. Families carried bags of cash just to buy bread. Trust in the future disappeared. Yet in this chaos, something else appeared. Airplanes. As the sky as escape. Whenever aircraft passed overhead, young Günther stopped everything. He would look up. To him, the sky represented something pure, untouched by politics, borders, or defeat. Pilots were not broken men in bread lines. They were free, masters of speed and space. Germany was forbidden from having an air force under the Treaty of Versailles, but aviation clubs and gliding schools quietly appeared. The dream of flight survived underground. As a teenager, Rall became obsessed with aerodynamics, engines, and navigation. He wasn't loud or arrogant. Teachers described him as calm, analytical, disciplined. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing control, something his generation lacked. Discipline over ideology. As the 1930s began, Germany changed again. The Nazi Party rose to power, promising strength, pride, and revival. Many young men were swept up by speeches, uniforms, and propaganda. But Günther Rall was different. He wasn't driven by ideology. He wasn't obsessed with politics. His motivation was professional excellence. In 1936, at age 18, Rall entered military training, choosing the Army first, and soon transitioning to aviation as Germany secretly rebuilt its air power. To him, flying was not about domination. It was about precision, survival, skill. A pilot who made mistakes died. There was no room for fantasy in the sky. The shadow of what was coming. By 1937, Europe stood on the edge of another catastrophe. Germany was rearming. Hitler was pushing borders. War was no longer a question of if, but when. Young Günther Rall completed his training with excellent evaluations. Instructors noted his sharp situational awareness, calm reaction under pressure, strong defensive instincts, traits that would later save his life. Again and again. At just 19 years old, he had no idea that within 2 years, he would be fighting across multiple fronts. He would be shot down 8 times. He would suffer injuries that should have killed him, and he would become one of the highest-scoring fighter aces in history. But in 1937, he was still just a young man looking at the sky, believing it was safer than the world below. September 1, 1939. When Germany invaded Poland, the world fell into war again. For Günther Rall, now a young Luftwaffe fighter pilot, The declaration of war didn't feel heroic. It felt heavy. There were no cheers inside the barracks, only silence. Every pilot understood one truth. In the air, there are no second chances. Rall was assigned to fly the Messerschmitt Bf 109, one of the most advanced fighter aircraft of its time. Fast, deadly, but unforgiving to mistakes. One wrong move meant fire, metal, and death. First missions. Fear without shame. Early missions were not dogfights. They were patrols, escorts. Long hours staring at empty skies. Heart racing, hands sweating inside gloves. Rall later admitted, "I was afraid on every flight. Anyone who says otherwise is lying." Fear was not weakness. Fear kept pilots alive. When enemy aircraft finally appeared, time compressed. The sky turned violent in seconds. First kill. A moment that never leaves. In 1940, during operations in the West, Rall encountered his first real air combat. A blur of motion, sun glare, shouts over the radio. Suddenly, an enemy aircraft crossed his gun sight. His finger pulled the trigger. The cannons roared. The enemy plane caught fire and fell away, spinning toward the earth. Rall didn't cheer. He didn't smile. He felt shock. I remember thinking, there was a man inside that aircraft. That moment marked the end of innocence. From that day forward, survival meant someone else would not survive. Skill over aggression. Unlike reckless aces, Rall did not chase kills blindly. His style was patient, calculated, defensive first. He studied enemy patterns. He avoided unnecessary risks. He disengaged when outnumbered. Many pilots mocked this approach. Many of those pilots did not live long. Operation Barbarossa. Hell opens in the east. June 22, 1941. Germany invaded the Soviet Union. For Luftwaffe pilots, the Eastern Front was a different universe. The sky was never empty. Soviet aircraft came in. Massive numbers, poorly coordinated but relentless, willing to die to bring you down. Rall was now flying multiple missions every day. Fatigue became constant. Sleep became rare. Death became routine. The first shoot-down. Reality strikes back. During one brutal mission, Rall was jumped by Soviet fighters. His aircraft was hit. Oil splashed across the canopy. The engine screamed. Controls stiffened. He barely managed to land behind German lines. Climbing out of the cockpit, shaking, covered in oil and sweat, he realized something. Skill alone does not guarantee survival. Luck mattered. Timing mattered. And death was always close. Growing reputation. Despite the danger, Rall's victory count began to rise. Not because he hunted kills, but because he outlived others. Commanders noticed his calm under pressure, his ability to bring aircraft back damaged, his refusal to panic. He was promoted. More responsibility followed, more pressure, and more enemies hunted him. The psychological war. By late 1941, Rall had already seen more death than most men see in a lifetime. Friends vanished. Seats in the mess hall stayed empty. Jokes stopped being funny. Every takeoff carried a silent question. Will I land again? Yet Rall kept flying, not for ideology, not for glory, but because stopping meant thinking, and thinking was unbearable. The pattern is set. By the end of 1941, Günther Rall was no longer a rookie. He had tasted victory and defeat. He had learned that the sky rewards only the careful. The real test, however, had not yet begun. Soon he would face catastrophic injuries, repeated shoot-downs, survival that bordered on the impossible. The day the sky tried to kill him. The Eastern Front did not forgive mistakes. By late 1941, Günther Rall was flying multiple combat missions daily, often exhausted, often hungry, always alert. The Soviet Air Force was learning fast. improving tactics, flying in greater numbers. On one winter morning, Rall took off like he had hundreds of times before. He didn't know it would end with fire. Ambush above the clouds. High above the frozen land, Rall's formation spotted Soviet fighters climbing from below. It happened instantly. Tracer rounds ripped through the sky. Radio chatter exploded into chaos. Aircraft scattered in every direction. Rall turned hard, pulling maximum G-force. Then, impact. A Soviet fighter had lined him up perfectly. The aircraft turns into a coffin. Cannon shells tore into the Bf-109. The cockpit filled with smoke. Flames burst along the engine cowling. The controls went dead. Rall was on fire. He later described the moment. The heat was unbearable. I knew I had seconds. There was no time to think, only instinct. Bail out through fire. Rall ripped the canopy free. The flames burned his hands. His face blistered. Smoke blinded him. He threw himself out of the aircraft. The wind ripped him away as the burning Messerschmitt exploded behind him. For a moment there was silence. Then the parachute opened, falling into enemy territory. Below him stretched Soviet-controlled land. Snow, forests, silence. Rall hit the ground hard, injured and burned. His left hand was severely damaged. His face was burned. His body ached everywhere. He hid, barely conscious, knowing capture or death was minutes away. Rescue against the odds. By sheer luck, German ground troops spotted his parachute. They dragged him away under fire. Rall drifted in and out of consciousness as he was rushed to a field hospital. The doctors were blunt. Severe burns, shrapnel wounds, damaged nerves. One doctor quietly said, "You are alive, but you may never fly again." The painful recovery. Weeks passed in hospitals. Burns healed slowly. Hands shook uncontrollably. Painkillers dulled the agony, but not the memories. Rall watched other wounded men die around him. Some begged to return to combat. Some begged for death. Rall said nothing. He only asked one question. "When can I fly?" Doctors shook their heads, defying medical orders. Against medical advice, Rall trained secretly. He strengthened his damaged hand, rebuilt muscle memory, forced his body to obey. Pain became routine. Failure became unacceptable. After months of pressure, testing, and argument, he was finally cleared to return. Many thought it was madness. Return to the sky. In 1942, Günther Rall climbed back into a cockpit. His hands trembled. His scars burned. But when the engine started, something inside him clicked. The sky hadn't beaten him. Yet, a man who refused to break. Most pilots who burned never returned. Rall did. But the war had changed him. From this moment forward, he would become more lethal, more cautions. A changed man returns to war. When Günther Rall returned to the Eastern Front in 1942, he was not the same pilot who had fallen from the sky in flames. His face carried scars. His hand still ached in cold weather. But his mind was sharper than ever. He had learned one brutal truth. Survival in the air depended not on bravery, but on discipline. From aggression to precision. Earlier in the war, Rall flew with youthful aggression. Fast, bold, sometimes reckless. Now he hunted differently. He studied enemy formations, attack angles, sun positions, escape routes. He waited, and when he struck, it was decisive. Other pilots chased glory. Rall chased certainty. The Eastern Front. A sky full of death. The skies over Russia were unforgiving. Hundreds of aircraft fought daily. Engines froze mid-air. Pilots vanished without a trace. Rall flew multiple sorties every day, sometimes landing only to refuel and take off again. Fatigue was constant. Fear was silent. Mistakes were fatal. Yet his victory count climbed rapidly. the numbers begin to rise. By mid-1942, Rall's name started circulating through Luftwaffe units. 10 victories, 25 victories, 50 victories. Each confirmed kill came with paperwork, witnesses, verification. This was not myth. This was record. But Rall did not celebrate. After each mission, he quietly returned, reviewed mistakes, and prepared for the next flight. Respect from friend and foe. Even enemy pilots noticed him. Soviet airmen later recalled, "Some Germans did not fight wildly. One of them waited. And then you were gone." Rall was known for attacking from blind spots, avoiding unnecessary dogfights, breaking off when risk increased. He valued life, including his own. Comrades fall, he endures. Many of Rall's closest friends died. Some burned. Some vanished into clouds. Some never returned from missions. Each loss hardened him. At night, he stared at maps, smoking quietly, replaying battles in his head. He rarely spoke of fear, but he felt it. Every pilot did. 100 victories, a rare achievement. In August 1942, Günther Rall achieved 100 confirmed aerial victories. Only a handful of pilots in history had reached such a number. There was no celebration, no grand speech, just a handshake, a medal, and orders for the next mission. War did not pause for heroes. Pressure of being the best. With fame came expectation. Commanders relied on him. Young pilots followed him. Mistakes by others became his responsibility. He trained new flyers, teaching them, do not chase, do not panic, survive first. Some listened. Many did not. The sky becomes a workplace. For Rall, flying stopped being thrilling. It became work. Cold, calculated, deadly. He once wrote later, "When flying becomes routine, that is when you are most dangerous and most at risk." The rise of a legend. By the end of 1942, Rall was among Germany's top aces. His confidence was absolute, his survival instinct unmatched. But fate was not finished with him. The sky would soon strike again, the mission that changed everything. By 1943, Günther Rall was no longer just a skilled pilot. He was a symbol. With over 200 confirmed aerial victories, he flew under enormous pressure. Commanders depended on him. Younger pilots looked to him for leadership. But war has no respect for reputation. On one routine patrol over the Eastern Front, Rall took off expecting another difficult but survivable mission. It would become the most dangerous moment of his life. An unexpected shot. The engagement was brief. Enemy fighters appeared, clashed, scattered. Rall broke formation, pursued a target, then disengaged. Textbook flying. As he turned back toward the friendly airspace, something happened. A single bullet, fired from long range, struck his aircraft. It passed through the cockpit and into his head. Pain beyond description. The impact shattered his jaw. His teeth exploded. Blood filled his mouth. Vision blurred. Rall later said, "I thought my face was gone." Despite the pain, he did not lose consciousness. Instinct took over. He could not speak. He could barely see, but he could still fly. A landing against all odds. With blood pouring down his flight suit, Rall guided the damaged aircraft back toward base. Every movement sent shockwaves of pain through his skull. He fought dizziness. He fought darkness. He fought shock. Somehow he landed. The moment the aircraft stopped, he collapsed. Doctors expect the worst. Medics rushed him into surgery. The bullet had shattered his jaw, destroyed several teeth, missed his brain by millimeters. Doctors were stunned he was alive. One surgeon said, "You should not be speaking, and you should not be flying." Rall could not speak at all. His jaw was wired shut. Liquid food was his only nutrition. Pain was constant. silence and reflection. For months, Rall lived in silence. No flying, no missions, only thoughts. He replayed the war in his mind. Friends lost, enemies killed. The narrow line between survival and death. For the first time, he considered the possibility that his flying career was over. The question of return. Commanders advised him to accept a staff role. The doctors warned, permanent nerve damage, risk of blindness, slower reaction time. Most men would have stopped. Rall did not. He began rehabilitation the moment doctors allowed movement. Training through pain. He relearned. Speaking, eating, controlling facial muscles. Then came physical training. Then simulator drills. Then endless medical evaluations. Every step hurt. Every step took time. But Rall had one goal: return to the cockpit. The decision that shocked everyone. In late 1943, against all expectations, Günther Rall was declared fit for limited flying duty. The medical board hesitated. Rall insisted. He signed waivers, accepted risks, ignored warnings. The sky had nearly killed him twice. He was going back. A man too tough to die. 2 crashes, burns, a bullet to the head. Still alive, still determined. The war had taken much from Günther Rall, but not his will. Returning as a ghost. When Günther Rall returned to operational flying in 1944, many believed they were seeing a ghost. A man burned once, shot in the head once, still standing. But the war he returned to was no longer the same. Germany was losing. Fuel was scarce. Experienced pilots were dead. And the skies were now ruled by a new enemy, a new threat: the Americans. The United States Army Air Forces arrived in overwhelming numbers. Hundreds of B-17 bombers filled the skies. Fighter escorts flew relentlessly. This was not the chaotic dogfighting of the Eastern Front. This was industrial war. Rall now faced P-47 Thunderbolts, P-51 Mustangs, highly trained Allied pilots. The margin for error was nearly zero, leading young men to war. Rall was no longer just a fighter ace. He was a leader. He commanded young pilots barely trained, sent into combat with outdated aircraft and little fuel. Before missions, he warned them, do not try to be heroes. Stay alive. Many would not return. Each loss weighed heavily on him. The sky is no longer fair. Rall scored additional victories, but the cost was higher than ever. Allied aircraft outnumbered them. Radar detected German movements. Bombers destroyed airfields faster than they could be repaired. Flying became survival, not dominance. For the first time, Rall openly admitted, we could not win this war in the air anymore. Another wound, another survival. During one engagement, Rall's aircraft was again damaged. Shrapnel tore into the cockpit. Smoke filled the cabin. Once more, he managed to land. His body carried scars from head to toe. Few men survived such repeated trauma. The psychological toll. What haunted Rall most was not death. It was survival. He outlived. Friends, students, commanders. Each survival felt heavier. In quiet moments, he questioned, why me? The end approaches. By 1945, Germany's defeat was inevitable. Orders made little sense. Airfields vanished. Pilots fled or surrendered. Rall flew his last combat missions with the knowledge that the war was lost. He did not fly for victory. He flew for his men. Surrender without celebration. When the war ended, there was no triumph. No speeches, no medals, only silence. Rall surrendered to Allied forces, alive, exhausted, and scarred. A man who had fought the war almost entirely in the sky had survived it. A survivor among ruins. The guns fell silent. The skies emptied. Günther Rall remained, but survival would bring its own challenges. The silence after the storm. When the war ended, Günther Rall expected relief. Instead, he found silence. No engines, no radio calls, no urgency, only ruins. Germany lay shattered. Cities reduced to rubble, families displaced, futures uncertain. For men like Rall, the war had defined every hour of life. Now there was nothing to fight, nothing to command, nothing to escape into, only memory. From ace to prisoner, Rall spent time as a prisoner of war. Unlike the sky, captivity was slow. Days blended together. Thoughts had nowhere to hide. He replayed missions endlessly. Friends who never returned. Young pilots he had trained. Enemies who fell from the sky. For the first time, there was no adrenaline to numb the weight of reflection. The question of guilt. Rall never denied his role. He had been a fighter pilot. He had destroyed aircraft. He had survived when others did not. But he also refused to glorify it. Later in life, he would say, "War does not make heroes. It only reveals character." He carried guilt, not political, not ideological, but human. Guilt for the lives lost on all sides. A Germany starting from zero. Released from captivity, Rall returned to a country struggling to exist. No military, no air force, no structure. Former aces worked as laborers, drivers, mechanics. Rall lived quietly. He avoided attention, avoided nostalgia, avoided war stories. Flying, once his entire life, was gone. Or so it seemed. An unexpected second chance. In the 1950s, West Germany began rebuilding under strict Allied control. A new defense force was planned, one that would never repeat the mistakes of the past. When discussions of a new air force began, Allied leaders sought experienced pilots who understood discipline, restraint, and responsibility. Günther Rall was contacted. He hesitated. Could a man shaped by war help build peace? Choosing responsibility over glory. Rall agreed, on one condition. The new Air Force would exist to defend, not dominate. He became one of the founding figures of the West. German Air Force, Bundesluftwaffe. No propaganda, no aggression, only professionalism. This was not the Luftwaffe he once knew. This was something new, learning from the past. Rall worked closely with former enemies, including American pilots he once fought. Together, they trained a new generation to value safety, discipline, accountability. Flying was no longer about kills. It was about control. End of Chapter 7. A warrior learns peace. Günther Rall had survived the war. Now he faced a harder task, living with its memory. But his story was not finished. A world turned upside down. The skies Günther Rall once ruled in war were now governed by peace treaties, alliances, and shared responsibility. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, the world had changed dramatically. Germany was divided. The Cold War had begun, and former enemies now stood side by side. Rall, once hunted by Allied pilots, now trained with them, joining NATO. When West Germany joined NATO in 1955, the Bundesluftwaffe became part of a larger international force. Rall rose quickly, not because of past victories, but because of his discipline and restraint. American officers who met him were surprised. They expected arrogance. They found professionalism, flying American aircraft. For the first time, Rall flew American jets, machines he once fought against. The cockpit language was different. The tactics were different. The mindset was different, yet the sky was the same. Rall adapted quickly, earning respect as an instructor and leader. One American pilot later recalled, "He never spoke about kills. He spoke about responsibility, teaching a new generation." Rall believed experience meant nothing if it wasn't shared. He taught young pilots, never underestimate the enemy, never overestimate yourself, never forget the human cost of mistakes. These lessons came not from theory, but survival. From fighter ace to general, Rall's calm authority led to steady promotions. Eventually, he became inspector of the German Air Force, one of the highest positions possible. A man once defined by war now shaped policy, safety standards, and international cooperation. Facing his past in the open, at international air shows and conferences, Rall met pilots who once tried to kill him. They laughed. They shared stories. They remembered friends on both sides. There was no hatred, only understanding. A personal philosophy emerges. Rall summed up his worldview simply. War teaches you how fragile life is. Peace teaches you how valuable it is. This philosophy guided every decision he made. The sky becomes a shared space. Once divided by war, the sky had become a place of cooperation, and Günther Rall stood at its center, not as a warrior, but as a guardian, counting victories, counting costs. By the time Günther Rall retired from active duty, his official tally stood at 275 confirmed aerial victories, a number that placed him among the most successful fighter aces in history. But the numbers never told the whole story. Each victory was a friend lost to the war, an enemy lost to the war, a human life extinguished. Rall understood this deeply. Debunking myths, legends grew around him, that he was invincible, that he never faltered, that he loved killing. Rall himself spent decades clarifying these myths. He often said, "I did my duty, yes, but I did not enjoy it. War is hell, not glory." For Rall, survival was not about luck. It was skill, discipline, and respect for danger. Mentor to generations. After retiring, Rall continued to teach. Young pilots, historians, and even journalists sought his insights. He shared lessons: precision over aggression, caution over recklessness, respect over arrogance. He became a living bridge between history and humanity, the man behind the ace. Few understood the personal toll he carried: burns, injuries, near-death experiences. These were scars that never faded. Even in peaceful skies, nightmares sometimes returned. He spoke little of them, but they shaped every decision, writing the record. Rall contributed to memoirs, interviews, and historical studies. He insisted on honesty, rejecting exaggeration or romanticization. History, he said, should not glorify war, but teach its consequences, recognition and honor. Governments and military organizations recognized him. German awards for service, NATO honors for leadership, international respect from former enemies, yet he remained humble. "I did what I had to. Others did too. That is all." Reflections on humanity. Late in life, Rall often reflected on the strange twists of fate, how a single bullet nearly ended him, how fires and crashes tested his limits, how the skies that once demanded death later allowed peace. For him, survival was more than living. It was responsibility to the living, a life examined. Günther Rall's legacy was not just numbers. It was a testimony of resilience, reflection, and humility. He was no longer a fighter ace. He was a man who had seen war, survived it, and taught the world its lessons. A life that spanned turmoil. Günther Rall lived to see the 21st century, a world transformed from the chaos of the skies he once ruled. For decades, he carried memories that could have crushed a lesser man. Fireballs in the Eastern Front, close calls with death, friends lost, enemies confronted. Yet he remained composed, a living testament to resilience, embracing peace. In his later years, Rall rarely spoke of aerial victories or military fame. Instead, he emphasized responsibility, humanity, learning from the past. He attended memorials, commemorations, and reunions, often silently observing rather than speaking. Mentorship until the end. Even in his twilight years, he offered guidance to aspiring pilots and historians. He reminded them, "The sky does not care for glory. It only asks for respect." His lessons were no longer tactical, they were moral. Personal reflections. He often reflected on survival, the randomness of life in combat, the weight of luck and skill, the importance of living with conscience. Rall understood that his legacy would not be measured solely by victories, but by the wisdom passed to others, family and solitude. Despite his fame, Rall cherished quiet life with his family. He found peace in walking through forests, watching aircraft fly overhead, reading history books. These moments grounded a man who had once flown through fire and death daily. A nation remembers. Germany, and indeed much of the world, honored him not for aggression, but for discipline, humanity in war, contribution to post-war peace. His story became part of history books, documentaries, and memorials. The Final Flight. On October 4, 2009, Günther Rall passed away at the age of 92. No roar of engines marked his departure. No medals were pinned, only quiet remembrance. He had lived a full life, survived the impossible, and taught lessons that outlasted the war. Legacy beyond the cockpit. 275 confirmed victories. Survivor of multiple near-death incidents. Post-war leader and mentor. Advocate of discipline, responsibility, and reflection. Rall's life embodied the paradox of war. Skill and survival. Courage and conscience. Destruction and humanity. A man who flew through history. Günther Rall's story concludes not with bullets or glory, but with reflection, survival, and the enduring human spirit.